With me, as he usually is in this time slot, Frank Gaffney, president of the Center for Security Policy. Go to securefreedom.org and counterjihad.com. Now, Frank, we spent the first section of the show speaking with Aaron Klein about what's happening in Israel with the UN, with the president threatening to cut off funds to the Palestinians, and we spoke about Iran. And I want to spend some more time with you on what's happening with the deep state and this transgender issue. I want to talk about North Korea with you, but I do want to get your thoughts on Iran and what's happening with the president threatening to cut off funds to the Palestinians. With Iran in particular, give me a sense of your opinion of the chasm between the leadership that's being shown by this current administration versus the previous one with President Obama.
Night and day doesn't begin to describe it, Alex. The president of the United States during the previous administration was determined to do everything conceivable, and frankly, things that weren't conceivable, to prop up, to legitimate, to enable, to empower, to enrich one of the most dangerous regimes on the planet, in the face, among other things, of the desperate pleas from its people for help in getting rid of it. And, you know, the coup de grace, if you will, was in clearing the way for the Iranian mullahs to get nuclear weapons. Maybe a little bit later, quite possibly very soon. All of this done by Barack Obama, very overtly, very explicitly, very tragically, I believe, for the people of Iran and our friends and our interests in the region, and increasingly now it's obvious to us even here at home. By contrast, as Aaron and you discussed earlier, I thought very well, Donald Trump has said, wait a minute, these guys are horrifically oppressing their own people. Obviously, there's a huge resentment, among other things, of the profiteering that the elites in Iran, both the mullahs and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the enablers of the regime's continued hold on power, they've made immense amount of money. And that was before Yes. Barack Obama transferred $150 billion to them. And I think what Donald Trump is saying is really regime change is the only answer here to the bomb and to the threats that it's placing, before both its own people and to us as well.
Okay, Frank, so let me ask you about President Obama here, because I was reading an article which was sort of a very subtle and clever dig at President Obama, who has done nothing. He hasn't spoken up at all. His alums, who are now kind of our pundit class, the alumni of the Obama years, they can't decide whether or not Trump is an idiot who needs to shut up, or whether or not Trump is actually doing good stuff, but only because of President Obama. They can't decide which one it is. It's one or the other. It's either Trump doesn't know what he's doing, or he's merely continuing the brilliant path Obama set us on. But he's been completely absent from all this. But they're sort of suggesting that he could actually play a role here, because we all know that there is something beyond politics, and that is trying to rid the world of some of this evil. Is there some good that President Obama could do if he came back to the world stage and encouraged some of these protests that are happening?
Oh, look, if he were to actually do something helpful, of course there's a role that he could play. I can't conceive of it. I mean, the guy was president of the United States for 8 years. I think we've actually put this to the test, Alex, that there's very little that you can point to, especially in the national security portfolio, in the way of a legacy of the Obama years that actually was good. And to think that it will be, the case, were he to be somehow, reconstituted as a leader of the United States in some form or fashion, that he would actually use that platform for good, I think is foolishness and frankly, very much unwarranted by past behavior. I wouldn't have anywhere near, positions of influence at this point.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you there. All right, let's shift our focus elsewhere in the world with Frank Gaffney. Now, first of all, I want to ask you about there's been some breaking news this morning that now the phone line between North Korea and South Korea it's been opened up again. We've got the president taunting Kim on Twitter, saying that his nuclear button is bigger than Kim's. Kim saying that he had a nuclear button on his desk. They've got another rocket launch prepared. This is again so the North Korea opening the phone line to the South is the first time that's happened in 2 years. But we've got this Twitter saber rattling going on with the president of the United States. Where do you think we stand on North Korea today?
Well, where we stand is that the North Korean regime is, alongside its strategic partner and ally, Iran, an extraordinarily dangerous regime. It happens to want something at the moment, Alex, and that is it wants its, steroid-laced, I'm sure, athletes to participate in the Winter Olympics in South Korea. And so, yeah, they'll open up a phone line for that purpose. It may be because they're working now with a South Korean government that is hard left, that is desperately anxious to try to get back in the business of appeasing the North Koreans and having negotiations and making investments and propping up the regime and so on. That the Kim Jong-un regime may well go further than just try to get some sort of arrangement on the Olympics. But the point is, it's not going to change one iota the danger that the North Korean government of Kim Jong-un represents to both South Korea, to Japan, to the United States increasingly. And I just would have to say, look, I have great admiration for President Trump, and I think in particular what he is trying to do in his new national security strategy to return to what my old boss Ronald Reagan called peace through strength is hugely important. Having said that, as the president talks about the size of his nuclear button, he is very shortly going to get a report called the Nuclear Posture Review. And if it's done honestly, it is going to tell him that his nuclear deterrent is in desperate straits. Surely we have lots of nuclear weapons. We have missiles and bombers and submarines and all that, vastly greater than anything North Korea has. But it is paling now by comparison with what the Russians have and, frankly, what the Chinese have. And it is ancient. It has been untested in realistic underground forms since 1992. We lack a industrial base to support it. So in all these ways, the president's right. We need a powerful nuclear deterrent. We want to impress our adversaries that we have one, but he is going to have to move mountains, Alex, to overcome the malign neglect of the previous 8 years and benign neglect of most of the presidents before that with respect to maintaining and modernizing our nuclear deterrent. So this is an important opportunity to take stock and take corrective action.
Right. Okay. So I want to continue with a few other topics here. Frank Gaffney is with me. Go to securefreedom.org or counterjihad.com to see what he's up to as president of the Center for Security Policy, one of the more important groups out here in Washington. And a couple other things. Rand Paul was calling out our funding of Pakistan, saying that they incarcerate Christians and they burn our flag. Pakistan, another one of the most horrific places on earth, doesn't get a ton of press. The president called it out. Again, I am sometimes the show focuses more on some of the domestic issues, Frank, but I mean these are very significant overtures that the president's making, and I think he's justified in doing so. What do you think of all this?
Well, I'm not sure I would characterize them as an overture as much as it's an honest critique. And I think it's long overdue and absolutely necessary. Alex, again, I mentioned North Korea as a very dangerous place. Another very dangerous place is Pakistan. The president is talking primarily about the double game that the Pakistanis have played for decades, bilking us of billions of dollars as they have used some of that funding and certainly their territory and their intelligence services and their military to support Sharia supremacism, not just in Afghanistan, but elsewhere around the world. But again, what has largely been ignored is Pakistan was one of the first places that the Chinese and the Russians, I think, but particularly the Chinese, helped go nuclear. A rogue state going nuclear, a Sharia supremacist regime going nuclear. And it has in turn helped the North Koreans. I believe it's helping the Iranians, may well be willing to help others, the Saudis among others, to go nuclear in due course as well. So the president is right to call them out. They're not happy about it. I think he's right to say, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to continue to pay you to subvert us and to make the world a more dangerous place. But I'm afraid the Chinese will be willing to pay them to do that and continue to enable them. So this is a very important topic. And let me just say how greatly I appreciate not only the chance to talk with you and your audience, Alex, but the attention that Breitbart does pay to these international and national security issues. It's a dangerous world, and you desperately need that kind of coverage.
Yeah, and so few outlets now are reporting on any of this stuff at all. And Breitbart, thanks to the diligence of Francis Martel and our team, we actually try to read primary source documents, not just rely on other people's filter on what's going on. And again, because it is so difficult to get the truth, because so many of these regimes control the media, and it is so hard to get full information. It's actually impossible to get full information, but we try our best. I think we're doing as well as just about anyone in the English language. But let's talk about China now, Frank, because you brought up the China-Pakistan connection, and the next story on my list to address with you is that China has basically defied Trump, fired back at him, and said that Pakistan is making great efforts and sacrifices against terrorism. I mean, this seems almost farcical, but I want to get your reaction to it.
Well, it was a very interesting piece. At the risk of promoting the competition, I do want to give credit to Bill Gertz yesterday at the Washington Free Beacon, had a really important story about a classified, secret, at least, memorandum from ostensibly inside the higher reaches of the Chinese government, where they're talking about basically their North Korean policy and how they're essentially not going to sanction the North Koreans. They are going to continue to support them. They don't want them to do another nuclear test, but otherwise they're going to arm them, they're going to finance them, they're going to get them fuel, all of the things Donald Trump called them out for doing the other day. And he's right. You know, you're not going to get, excuse me, Alex, you're not going to get a friendly outcome, as the president tweeted, if the Chinese are going to continue to support enemies of our country. And let me put that very starkly. I believe that's what the Chinese are doing, and I think that puts them in the category, as the president has talked about in his new national security strategy, of a competitor and adversary, not a friend, and certainly not a partner that we can rely on to help us with these adversaries that they're propping up and enabling to become a greater threat to all of us.
Okay, Frank, last question, last topic for the day. I want to ask you about something that has really seems to have happened without much debate, which is now you've got transgenders welcome into the military, and this is something that has kind of gives at least our own Matt Boyle suspicion that this is something that has to do with the deep state. I'm trying to figure out if the president was even briefed on this, but there's a lot of progressive influences in the various government agencies connected to our armed forces. And this is something that I think is not a good thing, Frank, but I'm also very confused by it because I know that now we're going to have the government subsidizing the same way we've done with folks in the past, where the government's going to be subsidizing gender transition surgeries and things like that. But it's also the reason I'm trying to understand the connection between whether or not a gender transition is a mental disorder, which it has been classified as that, at least in the past? And then if so, why is the government forced to pay for it? And why should you be allowed to serve with that condition? And if it's not a disorder, then I don't know why the government would pay for it anyway. Do you see the connection? Which is, I'm trying to point out something which is sort of inconsistent here, which is that if it's a disorder, the government shouldn't pay for it. But it also means you shouldn't be able to serve with this condition. I think it's very confused. I don't think the president has been briefed on it, and I'm trying to make sense of it all, and I can't do it. I'm trying not to be judgmental. I'm just trying to make sense of it. None of this makes sense aside from a progressive agenda to me.
Well, I reject the use of the term progressive to describe any of this because I don't think it's making
left
progress
wing. We'll say left
in any sense. Yeah, it's a radical leftist agenda, and I think it has, frankly, Alex, at its core, a wrecking operation run against the United States military. I think that's one of Barack Obama's profound legacies here. You talk about the deep state. Let's be clear. There are Obama appointees who helped put this president into the position he's in today. A fellow by the name of Bob Work was the Deputy Secretary of Defense under Ash Carter during the Obama administration. He engineered this arrangement whereby at the end of this year, last year now, Christmas time, the decision was going to be forced upon the president to allow this transgender thing to go through, despite a direct order from the president saying we weren't going to be doing that. Another Obama holdover, a fellow by the name of Anthony Curta, who unbelievably has been promoted by the Trump administration, is one of these LGBT promoting Defense Department bureaucrats, and he has been pushing this agenda forward. He's the guy who's going to be doing the study that the president is supposed to now rely upon to decide whether his policy should be overturned. In the meantime, you put your finger on the crux of the matter. There is something far bigger at work here, in my view, than just the issue of whether we're putting the United States military in a position where it has to accept people who have what has historically been seen, I think correctly, as a psychological disorder.
Yeah.
Gender dysphoria is what it's called. But the bigger issue, Alex, is the president of the United States is now being told by federal judges what the military is going to do or not do. This is a clear constitutional crisis. It violates Article 2 of the Constitution, which establishes the president as the commander-in-chief. Now, if federal judges can start telling him who's going to be in the military, you can bet it's a matter of time before they can start telling him what you'll do with the people they're telling you to have in the military. And that is the end of our ability to have an effective, necessary United States armed forces that will be able to protect this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's their job. We need them to do it. And the judges, especially the Obama and Clinton judges, aren't on that page. So this is a moment the president, I believe, needs a stay from this decision from the judges. The Supreme Court, I believe, will give him one if he asks for it. And the president needs to make it clear that anybody who is entered into this military during this period, Alex, is done so on a conditional basis, such that when this gets sorted out by the courts, hopefully quickly, the Supreme Court, he will be able to rescind the entrance of these folks with gender dysphoria into the armed forces without having to give them surgeries and hormone treatments and all kinds of other concessions.
Now, Frank, I'm in big trouble here if I don't take a break. But last question, and I'm just trying to clean up what my thinking earlier. If this is a mental disorder, then you can't be a combat troop, I don't think. I mean, I think that's sort of the tradition. If it's not a mental disorder, then why would the government pay for some of these procedures and transitions? So I don't see the logic here. If it's a mental disorder, you're not going to be able to serve. If it's not a mental disorder, then why do the taxpayers have to subsidize gender transitions? That's a logic that I think if it's presented to the president, he'll see it doesn't add up and he'll make the right call. But I get the impression the president is just simply not focused on this. He's not thinking about it.
He made the right call. he ordered the military on the 25th of August not to admit people with this disabling problem. The issue, Alex, is very simply that the left would like it to be the case that anybody they think needs it has a right to serve in the military. And with that right goes the right to all kinds of expensive treatments, even if it is the fact that people who have these kinds of treatments are not deployable for months and months and months on end.
Yeah.
In short, what we're talking about is, I think, an assault on the military, a diversion of their limited resources, and a disabling of their readiness. For all these reasons, the president's absolutely right, and he is, I think, now focusing on it, back from vacation, and I hope he will get A, a stay, and B, ensure that these people are only conditionally allowed into the military, not given an open-ended carte blanche.
Yeah, Frank, we have to take a break here, else I'm gonna get in big trouble. But we could come back.
You letting us go on.
Yeah, thank you. I could probably spend an hour with you on this topic. It's fascinating and disturbing at the same time, and I really do think it does reveal the huge divide, both intellectually and principally, between left and right in this country right now in terms of what our priorities are, which is maybe the most important discussions you can have, is about what priority is which. But that's Frank Gaffney, president of the Center for Security Policy, securefreedom.org, counterjihad.com. Quick break. Your calls when we come back.